Bullet for the Major. I don't know why this moment stuck with me so vividly. Maybe because it was the turning point. Maybe it was my moment. The moment when my choice became decisive. I sat in the snow. Me and my rifle, nothing else. Just the cold, the silence, and the waiting. Every time I was on a mission, I felt like my body wasn't really mine. I was just a head, hands, eyes, a pair of instincts, but not really feeling my body. So when I felt the cold, it felt almost foreign. Like a call from someone you weren't expecting, but knew would show up sooner or later. This time was different. I sat in the tower of an old warehouse in eastern Germany. The town had long been taken by the Allies, but the warehouse still stood. It reminded me of an old skeleton, empty, cracked, no longer shining with a former glory. My target was at the far end of the warehouse. A major in the Wehrmacht, high-ranking officer I was assigned to eliminate. German officers, always so confident, so prepared, they always seemed too reliable. My ears strained to catch every sound. The first few hours, I didn't move. I didn't breathe, not wanting to disturb the perfect silence. It was like a punishment, sitting for hours, freezing, and thinking that it could still all change. Though you know it won't. I knew what I had to do. It was clear, straightforward. Find the target, line up the shot, take it out. But even when you know what to do, when the task seems so obvious, there's always a part of you that doubts. Maybe it's just survival instinct. Maybe it's something deeper. What will I feel after I pull the trigger? After taking a life? After ending a man's future, his chance to see another day? He was just a person like me. In war, people rarely think about these things. All the ideals, politics, victories, those are for the politicians. We, the soldiers, just follow orders. The wind hissed softly, cutting through my gloves. I glanced at my watch, 15 minutes past midnight. Only a few minutes left before the major would appear on his regular route. When he walked into my line of sight, I'd be ready. I was ready, though it was hard to admit. My mind began to drift from the present. My target wasn't just a man on the far side of the warehouse. He was something more. I thought about the comrades I'd lost during this campaign. They'd left their families behind, left their lives unfinished, and now we had to pay them back. And the price would be cold and precise. My focus remained locked on the scope. A few minutes passed, then I saw movement. The major stepped from the shadows, walking slowly towards the warehouse. He was dressed in a dark winter coat, nearly blending in with the night's shadow, but I saw every step he took. He stopped for a second, as if sensing something was wrong. Then a few more steps, and he'd be in my kill zone. I double-checked the scope's focus. My hands started trembling slightly from the cold, but I knew it was a normal reaction. He was within my sights now. I could pull the trigger right now, but for some reason, I couldn't bring myself to do it. Again, that same moment, knowing I could act, but not acting. Only when his figure came closer to the spot where I had him locked in did I understand. He had no idea that he had so little time left. Yet this moment was my decision to make, and I had to push all doubts aside. And just then, I pulled the trigger. The moment I pulled the trigger, time seemed to stretch and contract in ways I couldn't explain. The sound of the shot was almost a whisper in the wind, swallowed by the vast emptiness of the warehouse around me. I watched through the scope as the bullet traveled in a perfect straight line, so fast that I almost couldn't believe it was real. The major's figure jerked, his body betraying the instant the impact took place. I could see the spray of red, the life draining from him in the blink of an eye. But it wasn't enough to make me feel anything. He collapsed, crumpling to the cold concrete, just like I knew he would. The target was down, just as planned. The mission was complete. Yet, as the seconds ticked by, I couldn't shake the sensation that something wasn't right. There was no sense of victory, no rush of adrenaline, nothing. Only an eerie quiet that filled the space around me, amplifying the confusion in my mind. I thought I'd feel different, that maybe this would somehow bring closure, but all I felt was an overwhelming sense of emptiness. I should have been relieved. The objective was met. My superiors would commend me for it. My comrades would celebrate. But in that stillness, I realized I wasn't celebrating anything. I wasn't even breathing normally. My chest felt tight, and my hands still gripped the rifle with an unfamiliar tension. I glanced down at my gloves, stained red with nothing more than the cold and the weight of what had just happened. In the distance, a few of the German soldiers seemed to notice the commotion. They gathered around the body of their officer, unaware that their lives, too, would change in a way they hadn't prepared for. There was a flicker of movement, the chaos of their sudden realization filling the air like static. I wasn't worried about them, not yet. My job was done. But watching them now, I wondered about their own thoughts. What did they feel when the bullet was coming for them, knowing their time had come? I slowly reloaded the rifle, taking my time, though there was no need to rush. I wasn't expecting anyone else to show up. The mission was finished, and I was supposed to leave. But something inside of me stalled. I wasn't sure if it was hesitation or something more, something that felt far less tangible than any of the orders I had followed. The cold had set deeper into my bones now, but it wasn't the cold that bothered me. It was the silence, the kind of silence that presses in on you and makes you feel like there's no escape from it. There was no sound of victory here, no cheers, no music, no honor. Just me sitting alone, watching the shadows creep across the walls, knowing that what I'd done couldn't be undone. I pulled myself to my feet, stepping away from the tower, leaving the rifle in place. But as I moved, I felt it, the weight of my own uncertainty creeping in. This wasn't what I expected. Not even close. The night stretched on, and I found myself walking through the deserted streets of the town, trying to shake the feeling that had begun to consume me. Every step felt like it led me further into something I didn't fully understand. I thought about the Major. What kind of life had he lived? Was he just a pawn, like the rest of us, bound by the whims of generals and politicians? Or had he believed in something, fought for something? Maybe he had his own story, his own family, his own dreams, but I would never know. I had just made sure they ended. The thought didn't sit well with me. I tried to focus on the objective. He was the enemy. After all, the man who represented everything I'd been trained to fight against. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized I couldn't see him as just an enemy anymore. I didn't even know if I had ever truly seen him as one. He was just a man who had lived a life, who had his own struggles, his own fears. And now he was just another casualty in a war that was eating everyone alive, including me. I reached the edge of the town, the shadows growing longer as the night deepened. I could still hear the faint voices of soldiers from the German ranks, but they seemed far away now, like a different world. I was walking back toward the outskirts, toward my extraction point, but even as I moved, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. There was a shift in the air, a subtle, almost imperceptible change, like the ground was moving beneath me. I paused, taking a breath, trying to steady myself. This was just the aftermath, the inevitable reflection that comes after a task is completed. I had to remind myself that I'd followed orders. That's what I was trained for. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized the mission wasn't over. The Major's death wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of something I couldn't fully comprehend. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the crumbling streets. I started moving again, but this time my pace was slower. Each step felt heavier, like the weight of the world was settling on my shoulders. I wasn't just walking away from the mission. I was walking away from everything that had led me to this moment, and I didn't know what that would mean for me. I glanced up, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw something that stopped me cold. A figure, just a silhouette in the distance, standing by the edge of the road. It was too dark to see clearly, but something about it caught my attention. The figure didn't move. It just stood there watching. I wasn't sure if it was a soldier, another enemy, or something else entirely. But in that moment, I realized that no matter how far I tried to run, the war, what I had done, would follow me. It would never leave. And no matter how much I wanted it to, there would never be closure. There would always be another step, another moment, another decision. The figure in the distance remained still, and I stood frozen, unsure whether to approach or turn away. But one thing was certain, I wasn't alone anymore. Not in the way I had been before. The figure remained motionless, standing in stark contrast to the night around it. I could feel my pulse quicken, the blood racing through my veins in response to the unease that had taken root in me. It was as if the air had shifted in that brief moment, becoming thick with something I couldn't quite name. I had expected the quiet after the shot. After all, this was how things worked, wasn't it? A job completed, a mission fulfilled, and then you simply moved on. That's what they told us. What we were trained to believe. But here I was, standing at the edge of the town, staring at this figure, uncertain of whether I should keep walking or turn back. I didn't approach immediately. I couldn't. There was something about the way the figure stood, so still, so deliberate, that made me hesitate. It wasn't natural, not in the way most people move. There was no nervous shift of weight, no glance around, no sign of anyone else. It was as if this person, this shadow standing in the moonlight, was waiting for something, waiting for me, perhaps. I took another step forward, my boots crunching the frost beneath me, the sound far louder than I wanted it to be. The figure didn't move. It didn't flinch or react to my presence in any way. I could feel my breath catching in my chest, as though something was being held in the air, waiting for the right moment to snap. But the world stayed eerily still. As I approached, the features of the figure began to take shape in the dim light. A tall man, wearing a dark coat that blended almost seamlessly into the shadows. His face was obscured by the low hood he wore, but I could make out his posture, straight, rigid, almost as if he were made of stone. And there, just beneath his hood, I caught a glint of something, a flash of metal that made my stomach tighten. It was the unmistakable shine of a German officer's insignia. For a moment, I thought I must be imagining things, that this was just the after effect of the adrenaline and the exhaustion settling in. But something about the situation felt too real, too tangible to be a mere product of my mind. My training kicked in, and I went instinctively to my sidearm, ready to pull it free from its holster, but I stopped. No, not yet. Something was different this time. There was a sense of familiarity, of recognition, that tugged at the back of my mind. I had seen this man before, though I couldn't place when or where. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, the figure spoke, his voice low and measured, as though each word had been carefully chosen. "You did your job well, Tom." The mention of my name made me freeze. How did he know my name? My heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, I wondered if I was being watched by someone else, someone who had been waiting for me to finish my task. The words hung in the air, their weight settling heavily on my chest. I didn't answer immediately. I couldn't. I wasn't sure what to say. Who was this man, and how did he know so much? "I've been waiting for you to make the right choice," the man continued, his voice calm, but there was something unnerving in its certainty. "You've made many choices, Tom, but this one has a cost." I wasn't sure if I wanted to hear more. My mind raced, trying to piece together the fragments of information. I had killed the major. That was the job. That was all. Why did this man seem to think there was something more? What was he talking about? My throat tightened, but I forced myself to speak. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice rough from the cold, though it wasn't the chill that made it hard to speak. It was the confusion, the uncertainty that had begun to eat at me. The man stepped forward slightly, the darkness of his coat shifting with his movement. I could see him more clearly now, his face coming into view, though still partially shadowed by the hood. There was a scar that ran down his left cheek, and his eyes, pale and piercing, seemed to see right through me, as if he knew things I wasn't ready to admit. "You don't understand, do you?" He let out a small, almost sad laugh. "The bullet you fired wasn't just for the major. It wasn't just for your comrades, your orders, your cause. It was for something much bigger." I shook my head, trying to make sense of what he was saying, but it only made everything feel more distant, more surreal. What was this man talking about? What was he trying to tell me? The whole thing felt like some kind of twisted riddle, one that I didn't have the pieces to solve. But even as I tried to push it aside, I couldn't. The words lodged themselves in my brain, replaying over and over. The man took another step forward, his gaze never leaving mine. "You may have completed your mission, but now you must face the consequences. The choice you made today was only the beginning." I took a step back, my hand still resting on the grip of my sidearm, but I didn't draw it. Something in the way the man spoke stopped me. He wasn't threatening me. He wasn't even angry. It was as if he was merely stating facts, delivering a truth I wasn't ready to hear. "Consequences," I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. The man nodded slowly, his expression hardening. "Every action has a consequence, Tom. You know that. But some consequences don't reveal themselves immediately. Sometimes they wait. Sometimes they linger. And when they finally catch up with you, it's too late." I felt a chill run through me that had nothing to do with the cold. His words settled in the pit of my stomach, and I knew deep down that he wasn't just talking about the mission. He was talking about something far deeper, something I had yet to understand. I had pulled the trigger, but the true consequences of that action weren't clear. Not yet. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could form any words, the man turned away. Without a word, he began to walk off into the night, disappearing into the shadows, leaving me standing there, rooted to the spot, the weight of his words still pressing down on me. As he disappeared into the darkness, I couldn't help but feel a growing sense of dread creeping into my chest. He had been right about one thing: the mission was far from over. And no matter how far I walked, no matter how much I tried to distance myself from the things I had done, I knew that the consequences, whatever they were, would find me. And when they did, I wasn't sure I'd be ready. I stood there for what seemed like an eternity, staring into the space where the man had vanished. The cold bit deeper into my skin, but it wasn't the kind of cold that comes from the weather. It was the kind that sinks into your soul, the kind that makes your bones ache and your thoughts blur into confusion. I could still feel his presence lingering, the weight of his words pressing on me like a hand on my chest. They refused to let go, twisting in my mind like a knot that refused to loosen, tightening with every passing moment. What did he mean? What consequences was he talking about? I couldn't shake the feeling that I had missed something, that there was a truth buried beneath the surface of this whole mission that I had failed to see. I had always known war wasn't just about the battles on the front lines, the strategic movements, the quick decisions, the clean kills. No, there was something more to it, something much darker that lay hidden beneath the surface, a truth that soldiers like me only encounter when they are too deep in the fog of war to turn back. But what that truth was, I couldn't yet comprehend. I turned slowly, as if unsure of what direction to go next. The streets of the town were still empty, silent, untouched by the chaos of war for now. The distant hum of engines and the faint murmur of voices from the German soldiers were all I could hear, but even those sounds seemed far away, muffled by the pounding in my head, the echo of the man's words. I didn't know how long I stood there, lost in my thoughts, but eventually, I took a step forward, the crunch of my boots on the frozen ground a harsh reminder of the present. The extraction point wasn't far now, but I had no real desire to hurry there. Something told me that the moment I reached it, the illusion of safety would disappear. I had no illusions left. The war had taught me that much. There was no safe place, no true retreat. There was only forward motion, only the next step, only the next order to follow. As I walked, I tried to push the thoughts of the man out of my head. I tried to focus on the mission, the objective, the task ahead, but it was impossible. His presence lingered like smoke, curling around my mind and refusing to be shaken off. I had no answers, no way to make sense of it all, and yet deep down, I knew I was only beginning to understand how much I still had to face. I had thought that pulling the trigger had been the end, that once the mission was complete, I could move on. But the truth was, it had been only a beginning of something far darker than I was prepared to confront. I reached the outskirts of the town, where the road stretched out before me, barren and desolate, lined with the skeletal remains of old buildings, their windows shattered and their walls crumbling. The night seemed to stretch on forever, as though it had no intention of giving way to dawn. The sky above me was a thick, oppressive gray, and the silence felt more suffocating than ever. It was as if the world had stopped, as though time itself had been suspended in this strange, in-between moment. I had seen enough of war to know that nothing was ever truly still. Even when the world seemed to pause, there was always something moving in the background, something waiting, something lurking. But as I walked, I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was coming for me now, I wasn't ready for it. The Major's death had been just one piece of the puzzle, a single thread in a much larger, much darker web that I had unknowingly entered. And now, as I walked alone through the desolate streets, I could feel the weight of that web closing in around me. By the time I reached the extraction point, the cold had worked its way into my bones, and I was numb. Numb not just to the freezing air, but to everything. My mind was a blur of thoughts, too many to process, too many to understand. I didn't feel like a soldier anymore. I didn't feel like anything. I just felt lost. The extraction team was waiting, but even their presence didn't bring the sense of relief I had expected. I wasn't sure what I had expected, but it certainly wasn't this strange, hollow emptiness that seemed to fill the space between me and them. I didn't even care to speak to them, didn't care to engage in the usual exchange of pleasantries or updates. I just nodded as they prepared the transport, my mind still wandering, still gripped by that feeling of foreboding. As the vehicle finally started moving, taking me away from the town, away from the mission, away from everything, I felt the tension in my chest loosen slightly, but it was only a temporary relief. I was still haunted by the encounter, by the man and his cryptic words. What had he meant by consequences? What was waiting for me now? Was there something more I had to do? Was there something I had missed? The road ahead was long, and the darkness of the night seemed endless. But I couldn't shake the feeling that no matter how far I went, no matter how much time passed, the shadows of that moment would never leave me. I had done my duty. I had followed the orders. And yet, I was left with more questions than answers. The war, I knew, would take much more from me than just my comrades. It had already begun to take pieces of who I was, and I wasn't sure how many more pieces I had left to give. The vehicle rumbled on, the engines hum a steady rhythm against the uncertainty that churned inside me. The cold outside, the miles of road ahead, the war itself. It all seemed so distant now, as though I was suspended in some strange limbo between the man I had been and the one I was becoming. And I didn't know which version of myself would be waiting for me when this was all over. I leaned back against the seat, closing my eyes, but the image of that figure, the man in the shadows, would not leave me. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew I would never forget it. No matter where I went, no matter how far I ran, that moment would stay with me. It would follow me, like a shadow in the dark, until I understood the truth. And the truth, I suspected, was something that would change everything. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was in control. And for the first time in a long while, I wondered if I ever had been.